Alright guys, so let's continue talking about the Leah Freeman case. If you are not familiar with this case, then I want you to go to my bio and there is a tab that says Leah Freeman case. Watch part 1 and all the way down until now, part 5. So after Leah went missing, but I believe before her body was actually found, the DA put the grand jury together, but ultimately there was no indictment, no charges were filed against Nick. And then the case went cold for years. All right, let's unlock some characters here. This is the District Attorney, Paul Frazier. There is the new police chief, Mark Daniels, that became the chief of police in 2008. So about 8 years after the death of Leah Freeman. This is her mom, Corey Courtwright, who has since passed away, Nick, Judge Barron, and Nick's attorney at the time. So in 2008, Chief Daniels comes on scene and he made it very public, with the media and everything, that he wanted to solve this case, that he was going to really focus in on finding out what happened to Leah. Then in the summer of 2010, so 10 years later, a new grand jury came together, they convened, and they started listening to testimony and everything in regards to this case. And Chief Daniels even invited 2020 to come along for the ride. So 2020 actually aired their episode on August 13th, and then Nick was arrested on August 24th of 2010, and he was originally charged with murder. So Nick goes to trial. He was acquitted of murder, but charged with manslaughter. And interestingly, Oregon is one of the only states, I believe there's only like 2 or 3 states, where you don't need a unanimous decision. So the jury was 10-2, with 10 finding him guilty, 2 finding him innocent, but all it takes is 10 of the 12 jurors. And again, that only happens in a couple states, with Oregon being one. So there was 2 jurors that did not think he was guilty, but their vote did not matter. So he was found guilty of manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and off he went. But during his time in prison, he actually got a new legal team, including folks from the Innocence Project, and they started re-looking at this case and discovered a lot of things. Let's just read what they said here. It says the Oregon Innocence Project staff and volunteers worked on Mr. McGuffin's case for 5 years, from 2014 to 2019, alongside attorneys from other firms up until his conviction was overturned in November of 2019. We dedicated thousands of hours to assisting him in overturning his wrongful conviction, reinvestigating the case, testing evidence for DNA that had never been testing, and explored the work of his original trial team. Testing identified an unidentified male's DNA on a critical piece of evidence, which was the shoe. Our work revealed serious flaws in the case against Mr. McGuffin, including a lack of objective evidence of the cause or mechanism of Leah Freeman's death, the timeline of the night of her disappearance presented at the trial by the state being contradicted by the state's theory of the crime, the possibility of a third-party involvement in her death, and ineffective assistance of trial counsel. So they presented this information to a new judge. The judge agreed. The conviction was ultimately overturned. So what does this mean? This means that not that Nick was innocent, but that there was information that was out there that was not given to the first trial, which then opens up the right for him to have a new trial. But the DA decides he doesn't want to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and read the press release from the District Attorney, Paul Frazier, that's dated December 17th of 2019. It says, late this morning, this office was notified by the Oregon Department of Justice that it would not appeal the decision of Senior Judge Sullivan entered in the post-conviction relief case of McGuffin versus Newth. In that case, Judge Sullivan ordered that Mr. McGuffin receive a new trial regarding his previous conviction of manslaughter in the first degree as it pertains to the death of Leah Freeman in the year 2020. After having consulted with members of the original investigating team and the family of Ms. Freeman, I have decided to not pursue a new trial in this case. As I have decided to not seek a new trial, I am required to dismiss the case against Mr. McGuffin. A copy of my motion to dismiss explaining my reasoning for not seeking a new trial is attached to this press release. Once the order granting the motion is signed and delivered to the Oregon Department of Corrections, I expect that Mr. McGuffin will be released from custody. There was a couple reasonings, including that it had been so many years that witnesses, some have passed away, some had major medical issues, that Nick had already served, almost all of his sentence, and that Leah's own mom just didn't want to go through a trial again. She didn't want to go through it. So all things considered, they did not pursue a new trial. So it does not mean that Nick was found innocent. And I think that's where people get confused. It did allow him the right to a new trial with all this new evidence that was later discovered, but he wasn't found innocent. He was just given the right to a new trial but then they decided not to do that new trial. So he was acquitted, or he was exonerated. And I also found it interesting because I found an interview with the Oregon State Police talking about that and that male DNA and how small it was. So it was such a small bit of DNA on that shoe that it can't even be put into the FBI system to match with somebody because it's so small. I believe that they can, if they have somebody, they can try to match it, but they can't just put it in the system to detect who it matches. So that's how small it is. And the fact that it could have came from anywhere. That piece of DNA could have came from a store that she walked in a month before her death. But there was no DNA evidence or anything like that really said he did it either. In fact, we still don't know. We know she died of a homicide, but we don't know the actual manner. There has been rumors or speculation, but there was never, the exact cause was never released. So Nick is a free man. He ended up filing a lawsuit against the Oregon State Lab and the city of Coquille. He ended up with $14 million, as I would too if I was him. And there's still no justice for Leah. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there. And I want you guys to follow, like, share, comment. Tell me what you guys think. Next, should we talk about other theories? There's been theories that have been circling around town for years. I've had some people in my DMs that have also told me some things. So we can talk about that in the next video.